My name's Kathie Nichols. I live on the Gold Coast in Queensland, in southeast Australia, on the east coast of Australia, and I love taking macro photography. Art has always been an interest for me, but I had 4 children, so I was busy raising them, and always too, I love interior decorating, and I often thought, I want to put something nice on my wall, so I thought, I can do that. So I started painting, and then my husband bought a little Kodak digital, a first camera, maybe 8 years ago, but I couldn't use it much because the storage system in the computer was only quite small. And I sort of just noticed, as I said in the story, the bark on the tree that night when I was going out to empty the compost. And it was all wet and the colours were brilliant. And I thought, wow, that's really nice. I'll go grab the camera, take a shot. And I did. And then I put it on the computer and cropped in, and I just saw amazing. And that was sort of my first taste of abstract photography. It wasn't a real macro, but it was close in crop. And then I started looking at things around me more closely in an abstract sort of way. And I was shooting all sorts of things, leaves and sunlight behind leaves and stems and things. And I was just playing around with for a couple of years. And then I have a very steady hand. So I know I've read a lot about macro photography, and there's old schools that say you have to have a macro lens for it to be officially a macro photo. And I wasn't sure about that. I just knew what I was photographing was fairly close, and I didn't think it really mattered as long as you got the end result. So when we travelled to the States, my daughter has married an American fellow there. They're living in Colorado, and they had our first grandchild. So we went for a visit 4 years ago, and that's when we bought my first camera, and it actually had a macro and a super macro setting on it. So I was very excited. So off I went, taking lots of photos of anything that took my fancy, and it sort of started from there. I think I probably took my first rock macros over there because I noticed in Colorado the wonderful colours and textures in rocks there. And then when we came back here, I just took off and I was shooting everything, rock, bark, mainly bark, but the quality and the clarity wasn't what I really wanted, and I could see something happening in there. And then I started to look for landscapes or trees or faces in what I was shooting. And something interesting I found too, if I photographed in the shade in the late afternoon, I got this blue colouring in it, which isn't natural to bark or rocks. And it just came out that way, and I thought, wow. And it wasn't until I sort of progressed along a bit more, discovering the grunge in rust and metal and peeling paint, that I could move the camera around. If there's a bit of shiny paint on there, I could move it around and get the reflection exactly where I wanted. So joining some online websites, Art Wanted was the first one that I joined, and when people started commenting on my work right away, I went, wow, they like my work. So it gave me a lot of confidence. And then I was there for about a year, and I made some really nice friends who are painters as well as photographers. And then I moved to Redbubble, where I've been for the last 3.5 years. Started a couple of groups there because the photographs that I was taking didn't quite fit into some of the groups. I'm sort of caught in between photography and art, and then there was some people on there that were commenting on my work, and I always go and look to see what sort of work they have. And there was a fellow on there who loved rust. Previously, before this, I'd actually been looking for some new forms of art and photography because I was getting a little bit tired of the bark. I think I photographed enough paper bark to last me a lifetime. And then I saw, he said, emailed me, and he said, he's found some of these textures and things in a dumpster. And I thought, oh, good, a new area to look. So I drive around estates where they were building houses, and they found the old rusty dumpsters. Then I started looking construction sites, anywhere I could, even going for a walk around the neighbourhood where I live here. It's a fairly new estate. but runoff through the gutters and the kerbs, you know, when people are treating, or there's clay, there's a lot of colourful clay. When it dries, it leaves these lovely markings in the curb and gutters. So it's always worth a look, and when you look through through your camera, you can see a lot more than if you just walk by. Yeah, the Kodak one only had a tiny, tiny little screen on it. It was only like 1.5 inches or something, I think. And then when I got the PowerShot S3IS, that had the swivel screen. So I could actually get into corners and around place and look from different angles to capture what I wanted. And then when I moved up to the G12, the Canon G12, which I only had 12 months ago, that had a much larger screen, so that was a couple of inches. And now the Canon D60, which I got last week, and that's got a much larger one. I think that's about 3 inch. So I'm still experimenting. I took a few photos this morning because I like doing stock photography as well. And I think that's helped me enormously with my skills in photography, because when you get a rejection, at first I got really, you know, you get really frustrated and upset because, you know, it wasn't good enough. But, you know, it just spurred you on. I said, well, and I'm really determined and stubborn, so I thought, well, I'm going to keep trying until I perfect this. So I'd search forums on stock sites, also on the art sites, and I'd Google. I'd look everywhere to find, to fix any problems that was wrong with my photography, such as blue fringing or noise. I never even heard of those terms until I started shooting for stock photography, but it was fun. But I don't put my artistic macro ones on the stock, because that's where I sort of want to move in an area that way. But the Shutterstock and the stock agencies are quite good. You earn a little bit of extra money there. No, it was my best subject at school. I always topped in my class with art, whether it was sculpture or painting or drawing. But I did dabble in a bit of painting, a bit of watercolours. I've got oodles and oodles of my early watercolour paintings just shoved under the bed, and when I look back at them, they're not all that great. But, you know, I've been learning as I go along, and then when we moved to Queensland, I started to get into a little bit more and painting some larger watercolours, which I had framed and hung in a local cafe. I actually sold one. And then the cafe closed down and I didn't sort of pursue it any further. But I was fairly interested in painting things to look nice in my home. And it sort of went from there. And then when we moved down the coast, I started to dabble in acrylic painting and on canvas. And I've got a few ones here and there, but I find it very difficult to let go of them. I can't, because I get attached to my paintings. Well, the lady actually found me on Redbubble. She just moved to Queensland and started a framing shop down at Twidhead. So they've sort of created a gallery next to the framing shop. And she approached me to supply some of my work for their opening. Some of my macro urban grungy shots there. I got one lady ordered one, the twilight reflections on a lake. So it actually looks like a painting, but it's layers and layers of different colours of paint which have sort of eroded and peeled away, and it kind of looks like a reflections in the distance of a boat on a lake. That one finished, and we've got another one coming up in May, and this one she's featuring my cherry blossom watercolour painting and just a few of my leaf macro abstracts that look like landscape. My printer says because my work is so abstract, it doesn't have to have the absolute perfection of clarity like you would with a big panoramic landscape, because as with art, when you look at abstract art, you know, standing, you know, a foot away from it doesn't do it justice. You stand back, and that sometimes I'll take a lot of photographs, and even sometimes I know there's some really good stuff in there, and I'll stick my camera in a corner and I'll just shoot, and then I don't get to see it till I put it on my computer. But more so now, I sort of try and compose my shots because I've got that many images in my camera. I had to get an extra storage.